Get You Some Radio.
Yes, you got to believe in yourself. I do tell that a lot of times to musicians. You know, they'll say, "Hey, will you listen to my band?" And I'll say, "Are you any good?" And that always kind of disarms people. Like,
right.
What do you mean? Like, are you good?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see it. They're like, "Well, I'm working on it." And
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be humble. That's fine. But at the same time, you got to believe. You got to know that you have what it takes to go after it.
Now, your weekly dose of inspiration, perspiration, and just the right amount of bull defecation. The Get You Some Radio Show with your host, the Vice President of Making Shit Happen, Terry Lancaster.
I am around these parts what we call a unicorn. I'm the last person in Nashville from Nashville. Grew up here, been in Nashville most of my entire life, and I've always been around country music stars, celebrities, country music royalty, so I've never really been fazed by it. My very first job when I was in high school, I delivered lime green Jell-O to Tammy Wynette in her hospital room. When I was in college working retail, I sold a toaster oven to Roseanne Cash. I eat at the same restaurants all the time. See Alan Jackson, used to see George Jones all the time at the Logan's in Cool Springs. And Vince Gill one time saved my 2-year-old daughter's life when she almost fell off the steps and she was just learning how to walk. And boom, a hand reached out and caught her, and that was Vince Gill. The strangest of all my celebrity encounters is I've showered with country music superstar Dierks Bentley. So don't really like to talk about that, but I have. But my biggest Nashville moment comes with today's guest. I walked into a show about 4 or 5 years ago, and my favorite band from the 90s was playing. And there on the stage was smiling Jay McDowell playing the bass, and he gave me a little salute when he saw me walk in. So my favorite band waved to me from the stage, and that was Jay McDowell from BR549. He's today's guest. Now, BR549 in the late 90s was my favorite band. They come out of Nashville like a firestorm, swept across the nation, had the late night talk shows, Grammy nominations. They did the whole 9 yards, and it started pretty much it started as a groundswell, but it seemed like it came out of nowhere. So we're going to talk. I know we talk a lot with the salespeople and entrepreneurs, but musicians are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They have to be grinding all the time. So we're going to be back to talk with Jay McDowell about how BR549 came about, how he got the ball rolling, and how he's turned it into a career now with what he's doing at the Musicians Hall of Fame here in Nashville. So he's built a spark into a fire. We'll be back with Jay McDowell right after this.
Make more friends. Sell more cars. 97% of car shoppers say they would prefer to know their salesperson before they ever set foot in the dealership. People buy from people they know, like, and trust, and they refer their family and friends to people they know, like, and trust. Visit terrylancaster.org to learn how your sales staff can get more reviews, more referrals, and more repeat business by building better, stronger, more authentic relationships online and in real life. terrylancaster.org.
Smiling Jay McDowell. What's going on, buddy?
Hello, how you been? I'm
fantastic, brother. I'm so excited to have you on here. I've been connected with Jay. Jay plays hockey. That's how I know most everybody that I know. So some of it comes about from hockey. So I met Jay through the ice rink, like I meet most people, and it was so fascinating. Like I said, they were my big time superstars. I used to sing Slewfoot to my kids when they were 2 and 3 years old. So that was
all right on.
So, but I've had a chance to talk with Jay a few times, and more importantly, he shares stories on Facebook about the whirlwind tour that happened when BR549 just sort of blew up. And he's an amazing storyteller. He's parlayed that career into a video editing career. He's working at the Musicians Hall of Fame. He's now a columnist writing in a hillbilly magazine. So he's telling stories. So I wanted to have him on the show to tell some of his stories. And Jay, tell us just how did you came to Nashville, and you were just a guy from Illinois, right?
Indiana, close enough.
Indiana, one of those I states right there in the middle. So
Yeah.
you came down here to be around Nashville. Tell us how you came here and how everything came about, how you got the ball rolling.
Sure. Well, I grew up playing music, and the very first time I came to Nashville as a child, I was just swept up in it. It was everybody played music, and music was all around, and I just was fascinated by that. So coming from Indiana, a lot of my friends there said, well, why would you go to Nashville? Everybody's good there. You won't stand out, or, and that was my answer. Everybody's good. That's why I want to go to Nashville. So it seemed like a really easy decision. And looking back on it, I'm so glad I did that. Nothing against Indiana, but I really, really feel like Nashville is the place. There's all the synergy going on here, and there's just a creative playground here. It's like you kind of touched on. I can't live up to that introduction you gave, but music and video and just all types of media and art and culture, it's all here. And I just was drawn to it. Love it.
Yeah, well, there's a million and one guitar pickers in Nashville, and they all come here from every parts. And then the joke is, well, you're a guitar player. Well, what restaurant are you waiting tables at? And everybody I know, no, not everybody I know, but I know a million people who came here from somewhere else, and they were the biggest deal in the world from where they were. And they're still. I know people who've been in Nashville 20 years who are building houses or working in an office somewhere, who still have a following in Nantucket. When they go back home, they can still sell out a bar because they're the biggest thing there. So how do you parlay that from being the biggest fish in a small pond to coming to Nashville and where everyone's good and how do you get known? How do you get known in such a big pond?
There's no answer. There's no correct answer to that. You just luck into a really good band and go out and sell millions of records. That's all you do. It's that simple.
Yeah.
No,
it is that simple. It is that simple. But it comes. You didn't luck into BR409. You networked your way into BR549.
I did. I hustled. I was going down to Lower Broadway when it was just singer-songwriters. It wasn't bands. There was the landscape of Lower Broadway back then, or we're talking early 90s, was songwriters trying to get their songs heard with the hope that someone would come through and hear their song and get it to the right person. And that seemed to be the hustle on Lower Broad. It was people trying to get their songs heard. And when I met Chuck Mead, he was down there as a songwriter and was working at Tootsie's actually. And he had just met up with Gary Bennett, who had moved to town also as a songwriter. Yeah. And they got together and started playing and put the band together. And so I just kind of smiled my way in and became the bass player. And it was unique because it was a show. It wasn't us just trying to get our songs heard. We were a band and we were putting it on. And like you said earlier, that's the amazing thing about Nashville. Everybody that you encounter, the guy at the gas station where you get your gas, exactly your waiter or your bartender, you find out eventually that they are really good songwriters or a great drummer, or it's you come to expect that everybody plays music.
Yeah. So I mean, and this was in the 90s. This was in the days before social media. How did you? Right. And that's one thing I want to touch on a little later. How things have changed for the artists now, because you have a different venue to get you expressed. But in the early 90s, I guess there were still porn stores and pawn shops up and down Broadway. Is that how long?
Yeah. Yeah, peep shows. And there were no police down there. It was wide open. I mean, it was shady and dangerous. And I laugh now that I have 3 kids. And I won't think twice about taking them downtown right now.
Yeah,
I don't worry about it. Back then, if I had kids, I would not have been hanging around Lower Broadway. But as a person in my early 20s, it was an amazing place to be. It was over the top, and it was just we felt like we were getting a show. We were putting on a show, playing in the band, but night after night, these people that showed up and the crazy characters that we interacted with, it was a show for us too.
You met Chuck, you met Gary down on Broadway, and you guys clicked. How did it start? I mean, you were playing, but how did you go from being the local guys down on Broadway to being on David Letterman?
Well, in hindsight, it happened really fast. It certainly didn't seem like it at the time, but we were just playing for tips and having a ball, doing whatever we wanted to do. Lower Broad was so wide open. There was no formula. There wasn't, it was just, nobody expected anything of us. But it allowed us the freedom to do what we wanted to do that we loved. So we would occasionally meet with record label people, and they would talk to us about, well, you got to change this, and you're going to have to add a keyboard player, and you can't dress that way, and you certainly can't call yourself BR549. They would come with every reason that we needed to change, but we weren't in it that wasn't our end goal to sell a bunch of records.
Right.
We wanted to do what we were doing and have fun. So it made it easy to turn them away. Now, the more we turned them away, the more desirable we became, because we didn't want to play the game. But I certainly didn't look at it like, oh, we're going to play this old-timey music and dress funny and call ourselves an odd mixture of numbers and letters, and we're going to be the next big thing. I certainly never saw that coming. Then as kids started coming, and it was just, we were seeing that it was just this wide range of audience. Was the demographic was across the board, and there was no typical visitor. It was just everybody, and people could relate to it and have a good time. And people danced at Roberts down on Broadway. So many, as you know, growing up in Nashville, you go to shows and people don't dance.
Right.
It's all musicians. They're all standing there, and they might really be enjoying the show, but it's like everybody's very cerebral and takes it in. And down on Broadway, it was different. People were drinking and having a good time and dancing, and it was just all types of people coming together. So that was our strength. We saw that. We knew that we were reaching all types of people. From a marketing point of view, it was a head scratcher, because who do you market to?
Yeah.
And so we, as a band, we figured that wasn't our problem. We were just going to do what we like to do and let the suits figure that out. So we ended up signing with Arista Records and made a record I'm still really proud of, that very first album. And yeah, it just seemed like in no time we were on the road and traveling and having a ball. And then I blinked twice and we were on David Letterman and at the Grammys, and it was just a whirlwind. It was, like I said, I couldn't process it all. It was too much coming at us every day. And I would call my mother back in Indiana and tell her what was going on. And I felt like she was the only person I could brag to, because everything I was telling her was this amazing stuff. And it felt like if I told my friends, they were like, oh, you think you're a big shot,
Right.
and it's like I couldn't tell everything that was happening, because it was just every day was more fantastic. And we got to meet, our idols, and we're going to these places that we'd only dreamed about, and got to experience and live it out. So I think I was talking to you earlier about that not having social media at the time. Now I'll kind of go back and something will spur memories. A picture will show up, or an old video clip of something that we did, and it'll make me remember it again. So I'll get up in the morning every day and start typing, and just, it's kind of therapy for me to dig back through all this stuff. So that's where the storytelling came from. And then as I transitioned from being a musician traveling on the road to a museum job, now I stay home in Nashville, and I get to deal with this history and the music and all of it. So it's a natural transition.
So you've got now, 20 years later, you have a significant social media following. The band still has a social media following, and you're still selling records on social media. How do you think you would be different if you guys were starting the band today in this era with these tools?
Oh, it's a whole different landscape. I don't have a good answer for that. It is different. It's same with record deals. There's not as much of a use for, you have the tools at your disposal now. You can get your music out to the masses. I think it's good and bad. It's harder to stand out because everybody has those tools available. So
right.
you're one of a million. Whereas when we were getting started, we were able to get a record deal and we were still, it was still a big sea of releases every week. There's new albums coming out on the big labels, but it was like you had a foot in the door. Whereas now I feel like it's a lot harder to set yourself apart. But I do. I've kind of looked back on that. It would have been exciting to be able to share everything that we were living every day on social media, and I kind of, I hate that. We had a telephone hotline that I would update every day and talk about our adventures.
I remember that. Yeah,
people would call in. It was a toll-free number, and that was our social media. It wasn't
1-900. It wasn't 900. It wasn't.
No, it was a toll-free, but people could check in, and it was exciting for them to hear about that we were playing at this club or opening for this superstar or appearing on this TV show, and it was a way for us to get the word out, just same as you would with social media now, that, hey, tomorrow we're going to be on the Conan O'Brien show, or next week we're going to be at Times Square debuting our album, or appearing at a record store, that kind of thing. So that was our way about it. But I do feel like the marketing thing is interesting now, because it is out there for everybody to have a shot at it, and it does. It's amazing the tools we have to work with, but also it's bigger hurdles to face.
Yeah, I drove my daughter back to Knoxville yesterday. She's in college there, and we were talking about music, and a couple of the bands that she listens to, she's really into them, and her friends are really into them, but they're not mainstream bands. They're not on the radio. And I said, with the way the music industry is, it seems to me, looking as an outsider looking in, that it's harder to blow up and be the big time. We're probably not going to have many more Rolling Stones. We're not going to have another Eagles that are around for 20 years and doing that, because the landscape is so different. But on the other hand, it's easier, I think, for a band to be the band that she listened to that we were talking specifically about were the Maine and We the Kings, which are not mainstream bands, but you go to their shows and they're packed. And they're selling records, and they're making a living. They're not on Letterman, but they're making a living playing music and having a good time. And they've got a following. They've got their tribes.
Right. And think about it from a historical perspective. If you go back before the technology was there, you had regional artists playing. I'm talking, before recorded music. So before radio, you've got this band is making a local noise, and everybody in that little holler knows them, and they're the people that they're dancing to on Saturday nights, and to the locals, they're famous. Exactly. You go 2 towns over, nobody's heard of them. So then radio comes out, and all of a sudden you have this antenna that can send the signal out and reach a national audience or a much bigger regional audience. Then recordings happen, and you can merchandise it, you can sell it, you can sell the recordings. So it's interesting to see it go from these little pockets to a massive mass media, back to these little pockets again. It's an interesting cycle, the way that's going through, and I can't help but think that there will be another wave of something that we don't even know what it is yet, that will bring it all together, and it will be a national or a worldwide thing. Yeah, that can happen. But it is fascinating, like you say, to see these successful musicians in these little areas. That you're right, you go to the shows and it's packed, and yet you think, well, people outside of this little area don't even know about this band yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange how things. And how much of the music business is the business, and how much of the music business is? I mean, from your standpoint, how much was it about the business, and how much is it about just playing the music? Well, and I think the guys have to be both now. They have to be both more than maybe they were before.
Yeah. And again, you go back to the guys that were all about the music and didn't care about the business, and you hear the classic stories of the old blues singers getting ripped off and taken advantage of by the businessmen. And that's not a new story. That's been going on forever. And yes, you do have to watch yourself now, and more so. I always make that analogy that if you, as I was growing up, the goal was to get a record deal. Mm-hmm. That seemed to be the be all end all. And then as I lived through that, and was lucky enough to be on a major label and have a big both publishing deal and a recording contract, I started realizing that a record deal is just a piece of paper. I can give you a record deal. You can give me a record deal. We can get a lawyer and write it up.
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean anything. It's a contract that you can rely on if there's success or failure. But the be all end all isn't just to get a record deal. And that was something I learned after going through it, that it took the mystery away from it a little bit and the allure of it away. Yeah. And it stripped it down, and I realized, well, you still gotta work. You still gotta get out there. It's almost like once the record deal happened, that's when the job really started.
Yeah, seems like.
I'd grown up feeling like, if I just had a record deal, then it would be a cake. And then it's, now you're at the very bottom of the chain, and you got to work against all these other people that are working their butts off. And that became really evident.
So if you were a kid who packed up your last $200 in a beat up old car and threw the guitar in the back seat, and you showed up in Nashville today, what advice would you give them? How would you get started?
That kid doesn't need advice. He's already done it.
Yeah.
You got to come to Nashville. You got to be where the action is. If you're into script writing, it's you want to be where those people are. You want to be where the business is. I would say head to Southern California because you want to be there. Of course, you have people that write songs and just stay where they are and try to network over the internet and everything. And I don't want to discourage them, but I do tell them my best advice is to come to Nashville. If you're a performer, if you're a songwriter, you want to be with the people that are fighting the same fight as you. And that's my best advice, is to go where the action is. If you're, it's daunting. It can be a scary prospect, but that is the first hurdle, is to go where the action is.
So let me switch it around. Like I said, as I told you, most of the people who watch this show and listen to this show, they're salespeople and entrepreneurs. I have a lot of automotive salespeople and insurance agents and real estate agents and plumbing supply salesmen. What did you learn through all of that and everything that you've done that would apply just to any person selling anything about just marketing and sales? How does your experience apply to them, you think?
Well, we absolutely were selling ourselves. That was the thing. We believed in it. We were ourselves. We weren't. On one hand, it was a bit carnival-like. You're going out. You're being the party. You're hawking yourself. You're selling yourself, and you're putting across that you're the good time. As a band.
Right.
At the same time, I honestly don't think I could go out. I know I couldn't go out and sell something I didn't believe in.
Yeah.
I believed in myself. I believed in us. We all believed in ourselves as a band. We could bring it every night. We worked hard, and we were all in.
Yeah.
I am in kind of awe of people that can go out and sell anything. A used car salesman type that can put it out there and sell it. That is impressive to me. I know that's not answering your question, but I guess you got to believe in yourself. I do tell that a lot of times to musicians. They'll say, "Hey, will you listen to my band?" And I'll say, "Are you any good?" And that always kind of disarms people. Like,
right.
What do you mean? Like, are you good?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can see it. They're like, "Well, I'm working on it." And
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be humble. That's fine. But at the same time, you got to believe. You got to know that you have what it takes to go after it, and hard work can overcome a lot of insecurities.
Yeah,
and that's the best advice for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing that I end up meeting people who are coming here, because I've been here so long and been around Nashville, and I've seen people go through. Not everyone's gone through what you have, but I've seen a lot of people who go through peaks and valleys and little bits of it, and not everyone comes out the other side okay. Some people come here and don't make it and they go home. Some people come here and don't make it, but they end up sticking and they find some way to build themselves, whether it's whether it's ancillary to the industry or something else. And you've parlayed BR549 into a career in Nashville you tell the story about, I guess it was Keith Richards you were jamming with, and you parlayed that into a video editing career. How do you come out the other side, and what have you done?
Well, you're exactly right. The way you set it up there is people come here and they have peaks and valleys, and I've certainly had my share of ups and downs. It's not like I showed up in Nashville and everything just worked out. You win some and you lose some, and you keep fighting through, and you have to adapt. So yes, I came here as a guitar player. This band needed an upright bass player, so I became that. I jumped in with both feet. It worked out. We had a really good time, really good run, made a good living. We were in New York City doing some rehearsals with Keith Richards and the Expensive Winos, his solo project. And it was amazing. And we spent 3 days in New York City, and it was in a rehearsal space. And just Keith was just like a teenage boy, excited about music and wanted to talk about guitar tunings and instruments and, Hank Williams songs and just really down to earth and really accessible and really fun. And when we were done with the project, it was 3 days. As we were leaving, we were saying goodbye, and we asked if we could get a picture with him, if the band could get a picture with Keith, and he said sure. And we couldn't come up with a camera. This was in the 90s. We didn't have cell phone cameras, and nobody had a camera. So he's kind of yelling at his people like, find me a camera. And nobody had a camera, and it was just kind of awkward and embarrassing. And my favorite memory of that was Keith said, you know how many times people take my picture every day, and when I want to have my picture taken, I can't find a camera. So we did find a camera. We got the picture. Keith was great, really gracious, really nice to us. We had a ball. But that prompted me to get a hold of our record label. At the time was Sony Records. And I said, man, we find ourselves in these amazing situations, and we should just have a camera with us for when we're with these superstars, and can you hook us up with a nice camera? And so not only did they send me a nice camera, it was a video camera. So it took still photos, but it took video. So I just started messing around with this video camera on the road and shooting stuff. And again, we were, backstage at Bob Dylan shows and all these big award shows, and going to Academy of Country Music Awards and Grammys and NBC Studios and all these places, and Don Imus show, and just to have that, to have footage of that, I was just having a blast videotaping everything. Well, that led me to go to Sony and say, hey, I've got all this amazing footage. Can we put out a DVD? At that time, it's about 2000. Everybody was putting out, with every new album, there would be a bonus DVD, and that was, and I had this amazing footage. Well, Sony was being sued by the Dixie Chicks, and business-wise, their hands were tied, and they couldn't put out anything. They didn't know if it was going to be for 2 weeks or 6 months. They just didn't know how long that whole suit was going to happen. So since they couldn't agree to anything, I think to appease me, they said, well, we've got this empty edit suite that you're welcome to mess around with if you want to use it. I know they were just trying to, shut me up by offering me that. But I took it. When we weren't on the road, I went into that office at Sony Records and started learning about editing and how to capture the footage. And I started calling old friends that I'd met at our music video shoots, and cameramen and editors, and just bugging them and asking them for help. So Sony saw me doing that and learning how to edit. And then we'd go on the road, and then we'd come back, and I'd go in there and treat it as an 8 to 5 job. And just, I wasn't getting paid, but I was just excited and learning it. So then Sony started throwing me little jobs to do, and little promo pieces to edit that were, in hindsight, were very simple. They were really easy jobs. Right. They weren't taking much of a chance on me, but it was throwing me a little money and getting me, when I would deliver, then they'd give me a little bigger job, and then they'd have me do an EPK for a new artist, or this or that. So then when it came time for me to step out of the band and not be on the road anymore, that was what I wanted to do. So my transition from touring musician to video editor was seamless. I was motivated and really inspired, and I started working on music videos and TV commercials and CMT shows and HGTV shows and commercials and all these things that were really exciting and fun. I loved the process, and the technology was brand new, and it was exciting. It was something different every day. And where with the band, we were making a record once a year and then going out and playing every night. It was fun.
Playing the same song every night.
But after a few years, it starts to be kind of monotonous.
Yeah.
The creative output was that kind of once a year kind of thing. We'd spend a week in the studio every year.
Mm-hmm.
But, with this video editing, I was cranking out something new every day. And sometimes, like I said, it might have been a soap commercial, but, a lot of times it was music, live music performances or documentaries about musicians and things. And that led me to the museum. They were starting this new Musicians Hall of Fame and needed video work done for the exhibits. And because of my connection with Sony Music, they recommended me. And so I can honestly say that because of Keith Richards, I am a multimedia curator at the Musicians Hall of Fame now.
So tell us about the museum. Talk about what you've got going on down there. Tell us about the museum, what it is, what's in there, and what you do.
We are on the first floor of the Municipal Auditorium, right in the middle of downtown Nashville. The building's been here for ages. We started as a museum to honor the musicians that are behind the scenes, the studio musicians, the road musicians, the people that aren't necessarily the big stars, but the people that bring those projects to life and songs that we've all grown up hearing. Now, as the museum has evolved and grown, we include a lot of musicians that you do know, names like Prince and Tom Petty and Elton John, that are big names. But the purpose of the thing started out to celebrate people like Benny Benjamin and James Jamerson of the Detroit Funk Brothers, the Motown guys that played on all those records. People like the Hal Blaines and Tommy Tedesco and Carol Kays of the Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles. Booker T and the MGs backed a lot of people in Memphis.
A lot of people.
In Nashville. So all these musicians that were kind of under the radar, we want to tell their stories and honor them. So we have this amazing collection here right in the middle of Nashville of all types of music that celebrates all these musicians. It's grown to include producers, songwriters, engineers. So from Jimi Hendrix, Johnny Cash to lesser known names like Gamble and Huff out of Philadelphia, or Swampers down in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. These musicians that have made up the soundtracks of our lives.
Yeah.
And typically some of the most exciting stories are people you would have never even heard of, but you certainly know their work.
Yeah. And you're telling that story.
Yeah.
Jay,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, just go ahead. I was just going to say I appreciate you being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you, and I want to tell you that not only do I know you from hockey, but I saw you give an inspirational speech talk one time, and it was great.
Yeah.
Keep that up. That was really good. And I'm always glad to see you on the ice out there. And I did a session with Charlie McCoy the other day, and he was a big supporter of Nashville hockey, and he's also one of the Musicians Hall of Famers.
Yeah, well, tell Charlie. I said, hey, he may not remember me. I was just a little rugrat running around, but he was very inspirational and very giving. As were a lot of the country music royalty. I never figured out why all the country music people were so into hockey. But when I was a kid, a lot of the big time players, a lot of the big time stars, donated their time to the hockey, donated equipment to the hockey. So we didn't have a lot of money as a kid, so I was using scruffed up equipment. Charlie McCoy probably paid for my first set of skates,
Great. Well, so Charlie told me one time that he got season tickets for the Nashville Knights,
mm-hmm.
And he bought tickets for Chet Atkins.
Yeah,
his motivation on that was if Chet was going to all the hockey games, he wouldn't book sessions those nights. Charlie wouldn't have to be booked on a session.
Now that's thinking.
So yeah, he was really really using his noggin there.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, and I think your experience. I'm glad you shared it, because business is business, and connecting with people and all the stuff that you went through. I think it applies to everywhere. It's just the other side of the coin. So keep on doing what you're doing, brother. And if I can help with anything, give me a shout.
Well, thanks, man. And I will say this to if you're editing this, my biggest goal in business is, if you're halfway intelligent and you're reliable, you'll go far. You don't even have to be fully intelligent.
Yeah.
But if you show up when you say you're going to show up and you are a decent person, you'll succeed in Nashville.
Show up and do the work.
That's it.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. Have a great one, man.
Thanks a lot, Terry.
Bye now.
Get You Some Radio. You've been listening to the Get You Some Radio Show. Subscribe today at terrylancaster.tv to hear more episodes, win valuable cash and prizes, and get free training to help you create an army of buyers who know, like, and trust you before they've ever even met you. It's a big, wide world, boys and girls. Get out there and get you some.